officer oath keeper? The Arlington Heights Bears? The Chicago mayoral election may be the big story you see in the headlines, but it's not the only story making waves throughout the city. I'm Andrea Zopp. This is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Join me as we dive into two major stories you may have missed, sorting through all of the election coverage. We'll be right back with our first guest.
There is an incredible and untapped talent pool in our country, one made up of people often experiencing homelessness and poverty. This week on Change Agents, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an organization and its leaders whose mission is to support this talent pool, help unlock their strengths, and showcase them to the world. Join me Thursday at 7 p.m. on CanTV 19. Download the brand new CanTV Plus app or stream us live on cantv.org.
Our police officers are supposed to protect and serve. So does membership or affiliation with certain groups automatically disqualify police officers from being able to uphold that very sacred oath? Well, that's a question that recently came before the Chicago City Council once a report suggested that more than a dozen Chicago police officers have ties to groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. What happened when that report was brought to the Chicago Police Department's attention? Well, here to explain more about how everything unfolded is today's first guest, Inspector General Deborah Witzberg. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's talk first. Let's do some definition just for all the people who don't know. What are the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys? And why is this important?
The Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are both groups widely regarded to be extremist political organizations holding a range of views. Both members of both groups have been affiliated with events that have loomed large on the national landscape, including the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. And in our work at the Office of Inspector General, we have in recent years seen several investigations coming out of the Chicago Police Department where members of CPD have been accused of being affiliated with each of those groups.
And so you recently did an investigation or made a report to the City Council. Tell us a little bit about what you were looking at and what you recommended to the City Council.
We've looked recently at two separate misconduct investigations that were conducted by CPD's Bureau of Internal Affairs, CPD's internal department looking at allegations of misconduct. In the first of those investigations, there was a CPD member alleged to be associated with the Proud Boys, and in the second, a CPD member alleged to be associated with the Oath Keepers. In both of those cases, as we are empowered to do by the Chicago Municipal Code, we reviewed the investigations conducted by the Bureau of Internal Affairs, and we found them to be deficient. We found the investigations to be inadequate. And so we recommended that the police department reopen those investigations to take another look at the evidence that they uncovered.
So when you say inadequate because they didn't take it seriously, they didn't ask enough questions, what were you expecting to see in the investigations that you didn't see?
Well, I think there are both specific and general problems here. We found specific deficiencies with each of those two investigations, having to do with a full analysis of the available evidence and, critically, with application of the Chicago Police Department's existing rules of conduct. I think while there are those specific questions about each of those cases, there is also a larger question about how seriously we take these cases and how seriously the police department and the city take the issue of members of extremist groups in the Chicago Police Department. I think that's a critically important question as we think about fostering trust between the police department and the community.
And that actually is at the core, really, of the point here. You know, there would be some people that would argue, what you do outside of work is what you do outside of work. Why does this matter? And why do you think this is an important topic to be investigated?
I think public safety and the ability of people to be and feel safe in our city is top of mind for so many Chicagoans. And the only path to keeping people safer, the only path to better public safety goes through reforming the police department and improving the quality of the relationship between the police department and the community it serves. Those things are critically connected. Fostering trust with the community and reforming the police department is not an alternative to public safety, it's a prerequisite to it. And so there's no issue more critical than this. The rules of the Chicago Police Department explicitly say that those rules of conduct apply to both the on-duty and the off-duty conduct of its members. Chicago Police officers are officers on duty or off. That's part of the good and honorable service that so many of them do. It means that the rules apply, whether or not people are at work.
Is there something in particular about being a member of an extremist group that you think is really important here for people to understand? We're not just talking about, any group that you belong to, but there's something about the beliefs of these particular groups and groups that promote hate that are at issue, I would think.
Absolutely. I think the question on the table is whether it can be consistent with the goals of the Chicago Police Department to have members affiliated with groups which espouse bias and hate for groups represented in Chicago's communities, and whether we as a city can live with the prospect of police officers associated with those groups appearing on the doorsteps of Chicagoans when they need help in an emergency.
Right. And I think the other thing, and I know you're very focused on this, that people often forget, it's not just that police officers are police officers all the time, but we give them a lot of authority to do certain things, right? And so it's about how they're going to act with that authority. And I think the other point that you touched on is that we are a very diverse city. So if you have membership in a group that espouses hate towards 2/3 of the people that you are supposed to be policing, or any portion of that, is that core at what you're trying to get at?
That's exactly right. I think that's absolutely right. And the rules of the police department, the rules that are already on the books that apply to on-duty conduct and off, make it a rule violation. They make it misconduct to interfere with the goals of the police department, even when the actions that might interfere with the goals of the police department are not themselves illegal. So it doesn't have to be that a police officer is committing a crime in order to break the rule against interfering with the department's goals. I take the department at its word that among its most important goals is to foster trust with the community and to build its credibility in Chicago's neighborhoods. And I think that's the critical question on the table, is whether there is a way to read association with an extremist group as doing anything but interfering with that goal.
How were your recommendations received by the City Council? What happens next?
Our recommendations on these investigations specifically went to the Chicago Police Department, and they were to reopen these investigations. The police department reopened both of these investigations at our request. They did not reach outcomes after reopening them, which I think were frankly satisfying. I think the outcomes in both of these cases were dissatisfying. And I think that was on display before the City Council, where I think many council members also struggled to find a satisfying answer in the police department's handling of these cases.
What were the police department's outcomes or recommendations?
Well, in the Proud Boys case, there was an officer who the police department found to have made both a false and a contradictory statement about his association with the Proud Boys. The police department came to an agreement with that officer that he would be suspended for 120 days. He has in fact served that suspension and is back on the job, despite not only the issue of his association with the Proud Boys, but as well the finding that he had lied.
Right, that's kind of incredible. I thought, from my days on the police board, typically if you have a police officer that lies, it's a disqualifying event because, of course, at some point you'll have to testify in court, and what your word is puts people in custody. So if you're not trustworthy, that's an issue.
That's right.
That's kind of shocking.
It is kind of shocking, and both you and I have spent time as a prosecutor, and I think I worry a lot about the criminal justice outcomes that are at risk in situations like that. In the second case, in the case of the Oath Keepers, the police department came to a determination that membership in that group could not constitute a rule violation.
That is also shocking. Well, it's their determination, and for now we have to live with it. This has been a really eye-opening and important conversation that I think we'll have to continue because it really does matter about whether or not you can live up to the oath to protect and serve all of the citizens of the city if your personal views are inconsistent with that and you associate with others who are inconsistent with that. Deborah, thank you so much. I hope at some point you'll come back because I'm sure there are other really interesting things that you're talking about that our viewers would love to talk about. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you.
We thank the Inspector General for her time and for shedding light on this very complex issue. We'll be right back after this.
Being in debt sucks, but guess what? You don't have to stay there. Tune in to In the Money this week to learn how to change your mind and to get out of debt.
One of the biggest ways that people get into the debt is that they don't actually budget and follow the budget that they set. So they typically overspend.
I'll see you this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN-TV 19, cantv.org, and on the new CAN-TV Plus app.
Well, sports fans, it looks like the Chicago Bears are one step closer to being the Chicago Bears in name only, as the team recently announced that they've closed on 326 acres of property that used to be the Arlington Heights race course. The Bears have been an institution for more than 100 years and are one of the NFL's original teams. So what does this move mean? How will it impact the city? And how will it impact the fans? Joining us today for our roundtable discussion are Ernest Tolden, a sports producer at WGN, Xavier Pope, a contributor for ESPN Radio, and Joseph Phillips, sports editor at the Chicago Crusader. Welcome, gentlemen. So, why are the Bears moving to Arlington Heights? What's up? What's wrong with Chicago and Soldier Field? What? Is it the space? Is it the location? Is it the city? What do you think? Xavier, I'll start with you.
Well, the Chicago Bears have closed on this property in Arlington Heights. They have not said that they are going to go ahead and move away from Chicago, although all signs point to it. But with the whole kitchen sink being thrown at the Bears by the city of Chicago, this only helps them sweeten the pot for more to gain from the city of Chicago as they consider options for the future of where to build a stadium and potentially raise more money for that franchise.
So you think not a done deal?
I'm a lawyer by trade. I like to see proof. There hasn't been a stadium built. There's been ground broken, but I want to see a stadium built. I want to see the Bears put their money where their mouths are in terms of developing this property, making it something that actually becomes reality before I decide to say goodbye to the Chicago Bears from the city of Chicago.
Well, the Bears, they see the landscape of the NFL. You know, it's no longer the time where just because you're called the Chicago Bears, you need to play in Chicago. We saw this 2-3 decades ago when the Bears flirted with the idea of Gary, Indiana. But they see the landscape of the NFL where the San Francisco 49ers play in Santa Clara. The Giants and Jets haven't played in New York in decades. And so forth. The Dallas Cowboys, they play in Arlington. So they're not too worried about being called the Chicago Bears. They're looking at the fact that they will still be in the Chicagoland area with all this extra space and, more importantly, ownership and control. Ownership and control means more to the Bears than being called the Chicago Bears, which is a name that will never change.
That's a great point. Joseph, what do you think?
Well, for years, the city has had leverage over the Chicago Bears. And this time, they're playing a different ball game. Right now, the Bears have the leverage. And in addition to having the leverage, they have the finances to back up that leverage. And at any moment, at any time, they can lay down the big joker and move to Arlington.
Yeah. Do you think that Arlington, though, first of all, they have to build something there, build a stadium. Second of all, I mean, Arlington Heights isn't exactly easy to get to. And so, you know, one of the incredible things about Soldier Field is the location. And so does that matter at all in this discussion?
Well, when it comes to location, most Chicago Bears fans, season ticket holders, are from the northwest suburbs, according to research.
I did not know
So a lot of times when we look at it as Chicago Bears fans, I'm not trying to speak down any communities, but we're coming from like, hey, we support the team, but we're going to support them from home. But most of their fans are from the northwest suburbs. So it's a smooth transition for them to move out to a suburban area because they know that that's where most of their support and most of their season ticket holders are coming from.
But doesn't that then undercut who they can go to, you know, draw from Indiana and draw from other parts? I don't know.
No, because there are 8 home games a year for each NFL team with a new schedule, sometimes 9. They will fill that 70 to 75,000 fans every other week, every 2 weeks, whenever they have a home game. Now, if this is another sport like the NBA or NHL, baseball, that might be more of an issue. But the Chicago Bears, one of the charter franchises in the NFL, no matter what their record is, unfortunately, will fill those seats. they can raise the ticket prices every year, they will fill those seats. So they're not worried about, their fans coming from Indiana or Wisconsin or wherever else in the Midwest. They know butts will be in those seats, and that won't be a problem.
You also have the prospect of the Chicago Bears wanting to have a year-round stadium, potentially with a dome. Justin Fields, current starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, said he wanted a dome to be able to play those cold weather games and inside where it's nice and warm. And that also gives the opportunity for the Bears to bring other sporting events like the Super Bowl to this area. And so that's what fans also see, in addition to making that long haul. Hey, we get to have a Super Bowl here in the city of Chicago. That's something that the city has never had. And also other big worldwide events that will come to the city of Chicago with a facility like that.
Don't you think, though, couldn't we just redevelop Soldier Field? Why not figure out a way to construct and put a dome on Soldier Field or next to Soldier Field, or do something else? I mean, you could build a whole thing of economic development. Why not do it right there on the lakefront?
We've already landed a spaceship in the middle of Soldier Field already. I mean, it was pretty impressive of the designs that we've seen come out about any proposed future of Soldier Field. If it has to be better than what it is now, it has to be able to increase the capacity. The Chicago Bears is one of the lowest capacity franchises in the National Football League. So being able to increase that capacity, to be able to create something around the stadium, to be able to draw other types of sporting events, it has to have a covering in the wintertime to be able to track something like a Super Bowl, like a March Madness type of style event that makes it a world-class facility that competes with the SoFi stadiums that you see the Los Angeles Rams had that just hosted a Super Bowl. That's the bigger ticket in terms of making it more than just about football.
Who pays for that? So if we're going to do that in Arlington Heights, who's going to pay for that? Are taxpayers going to be on the hook for that? Should they be on the hook for that? Because there might be some tax benefits, but it's a huge expense for a private entity to ask the taxpayers to step up. I don't know, Joseph, you have a view?
Well, according to several sources, it seems to me that the Bears are going to cover most of the costs, but at the same time, the city officials are looking to fund some of the bill, a small percentage of the bill to the taxpayers. In addition to that, the Bears made a big hire this year in Kevin Warren. And he has the knowledge and experience and the know-how on what it takes to build a brand new state-of-the-art stadium where it will benefit both sides. In addition to that, they've been getting consulting from the Los Angeles Rams and SoFi Stadium. And they did a great collaboration with the mayor in Inglewood, I believe.
Inglewood.
The mayor in Inglewood, where it didn't really affect the taxpayers out there. So I think they're taking their blueprint from them, and then they're going to implement that blueprint based on if the city decides not to bring them back to the negotiating table with the new mayor that's coming into power. So the Bears are right where they're supposed to be. They have all the bargaining and leverage behind them.
What does Kevin Warren bring to the table? You mentioned him. Anybody agree that he's a big asset for the Bears?
Yes, he brings to the table of getting things done. You look at his 3 years as a Big Ten commissioner. There was lots of debate if he handled the scheduling during the 2020 pandemic season correctly. He didn't make friends that year. But other than that, he's a commissioner for arguably the most profitable and popular college conference. Got them a new TV deal. Oh, and by the way, in the second largest market in Los Angeles, their two biggest schools are somehow coming to the Big Ten Conference, which means you're going to have future events, not just in Chicago, not just in Indianapolis, but in LA. And Kevin Warren's footprint is all over that. In addition to this wave of new stadiums that we've seen pop up in the National Football League over the last 5-10 years, look no further than US Bank Stadium, which he had a strong hand in helping build that stadium that's already hosted a Super Bowl. So one of the bigger state-of-the-art stadiums in the National Football League, right in the Bears division where they go every year, Kevin Warren had a hand in that. So you look at his history in college football, college athletics, and also the NFL. And he has a track record of getting things done. And the Bears, that was a slam dunk hire in terms of all the off-field news that the Bears have had going on over the last couple of years.
You think he's a plus? He's a good plus for us.
I mean, he also
Bears
he's
fans?
been here in Chicago,
Yes.
and he's been dealing with the politics of the region as well. So this isn't him coming to a new area and trying to figure out the landscape. He's been working with this landscape for quite some time. He's able to apply that just with another institution and be able to apply what he's already done to the Chicago Bears. Now, the big thing is how will fans feel about their team? Every single professional sports franchise in Chicago is in Chicago. So I know we talked about this earlier in terms of what New York has done and what LA, and we've seen other cities have stadiums outside of the city, but it's a unique Chicago thing to have our teams inside of the city. And how will fans really feel about something that seems a little bit more foreign than they've ever felt before? We've had teams threaten to leave the city all the time, but they've always managed to stay here in the city of Chicago.
Well, to that point, you mentioned the new mayor. Is there a role for the new mayor, whoever it is, to maybe reopen or push or change or influence negotiations with the Bears in such a way that maybe we do get them to stay in the city?
I'm actually surprised that we haven't heard more talk from the two remaining candidates about keeping the Bears in the city of Chicago. And that says to me that they feel they have no power or no say-so, or they don't believe that whatever they say or they may hold to what their ability to be able to keep the Bears in the city of Chicago. But you would think out of all the issues, I know that crime and policing, and that's at the top of the menu, and how it's spending the city's budget, but the Chicago Bears, keeping them in the city is a big deal.
And I did hear from Paul Vilas, I think it was in one of his debates, they were asking him, would you bring the Bears back to the negotiation table, or would you help fund it? And he did mention a few things about it, and I think he said no to it because he didn't want to have the taxpayers or anybody financially struggling to pay the team to keep them in business. So in addition to that, the other candidate did mention the fact that he will help the Bears, but I don't think he's in position to win because, you have the police union versus the teachers union. And right now, the city is looking for protection. So I think Paul Vilas is going to be that man who eventually will win the election. And hopefully, and it's just my prayer, that he can bring the Bears back to the negotiation table. Hopefully.
Ernest is like,
Mayoral predictions going on right now.
Yeah, so I'm just putting it out there.
If this was 2019, 2020, this could be a discussion.
Yeah.
Use the airport analogy, that the door is closed.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ship
the
sail.
plane hasn't taken off yet, but that door is closed.
Yeah.
And if you ever missed a flight and had people close that door in front of you, that's what's happening now. So I think it's kind of a waste of a time if the mayoral candidates want to make that over the next, 5-6 weeks, the Bears part of their runoff political campaign. I just think it's a waste of time. It's one thing when that story came out in 2020, 2021, that the Bears are snooping around Arlington Heights. But so much has done. That's when you come up with the new renderings of the proposed, how would they renovate the current Soldier Field.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They didn't do that until way too late in the game.
Right.
Bears, in my opinion, are gone. They closed on that property. They say they're still evaluating what they want to do with that. They want to put a football stadium there. And there's been billions of dollars that's invested into that, and that ship has sailed.
Billions of dollars have not been invested yet in that
It's
property.
not official.
So, I started out at the beginning of this segment talking about proof. Right. And until the Bears actually really, truly start building that facility.
Shoveling the ground.
Shoveling the ground, making that where they're going to be. This is small potatoes for the Bears in terms of what that commitment took to be able to do that. The mayor that was involved in that proposal, it's gone. And didn't help herself by trying to keep the Bears or getting some sort of commitment, making that happen. And I think that is an issue that one of those two candidates should probably exploit. And I know you talked about some of the things that they've said, but it hasn't been enough to resonate with the city to be able to say, we're going to keep the Bears in Chicago. The fact that fans feel like it's a foregone conclusion, it's kind of depressing to me as a Chicagoan that grew up watching all of my sports teams in the city, that we just feel like a team is going to go to Arlington Heights in a failed location for a failed business in a place that nobody really wants to get into and spend all the time and attention to get into. And look what happened with some of those fans out there in San Francisco. They have a tough time getting into those games, missing games. Those late arriving fans at those games, it is a problem for those fans. So I do believe that there is the potential for one of these candidates to step up, come up with a plan. If you feel as if the polling is not working out for you, get something together, put something on the table to make sure that the city sees that you're really serious about keeping the Bears in the city of Chicago.
I also think, for me, there's this piece about all the tax revenue that's going to generate it going to little Arlington Heights, right? You're like, as opposed to, we could really use that in the economic development. I think there's a real argument to be made for that here in the city. Well, we'll see. Do you think a new stadium will help improve the Bears' record? I don't know, what were we, 22-23 last season?
I tell you what, they could barely figure out what grass they could grow on the field. You know, it was a big deal this year with the Kentucky bluegrass, but I forgot the name, it's slipping my mind right now. But you know, for years, you know, Park District owned, Bears fans, Bears players have complained about that turf, which directly affects your speed. You know, now they have a more, not more, but one of the more faster mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, who, as you said earlier, openly said he would like to play in a dome, weather controlled environment. You look at things like that, like, hey, you know, it could impact free agency. You know, these guys these days, it's not like 30 years ago. They don't want to play in the snow in playoff games. They don't want to play in 2-degree weather, literally, like the Bears game against the Bills this past December. So it could impact the performance on the field.
Well, we will see, won't we? Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I don't know if this move gets us any closer to the Lombardi Trophy, but it certainly succeeded in getting all of us talking about the team. We really appreciate your insight and your thoughts. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm Melissa Donaldson, and I like to call myself a curious boomer. On the next episode, my guests explore workplace dynamics and what it takes to navigate office space. Dropping nuggets and gems everywhere. Tune in Mondays at 7:00 p.m. on CAN-TV 19, cantv.org, or stream live on the new CAN-TV Plus app.
The news cycle in Chicago is a never-ending one. There will always be a big story that's overlooked because an even bigger story is breaking. My hope, though, is that we're giving the important stories the time and attention they deserve, because being an informed city makes us a better city. Thank you, Chicago. See you next time.